Welcome to Google Developers Live. You're on our 4th episode of the office hours for Udacity CS256 mobile web development. I'm here in the studio this week only with Sean Bennett, the course architect from Udacity. Chris is out in Maui.
Yeah, lucky him.
It's a rough life.
Yeah, very rough. But
so
he's here with us in spirit.
That's right. That's right. Fortunately, he's out there scuba diving.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So we have some great questions, and let's dive right into them.
Yeah.
So the first question is from Matthias in Los Angeles. Actually, it's a two-part question. So since the mobile web is practically changing every day, how do you not see Udacity making another mobile web development course in a matter of a couple of months? So that part, I think, well, there are two parts to that. Of course, we are hard at work at defining what our next course should be. We don't have any details quite yet. But I think we did take the approach that we use a lot of the fundamentals in this course. So we don't expect that this course will change that much. Some areas obviously are subject to change and will need to be redone.
Responsive images comes to mind.
Yeah, exactly.
That's evolving every day.
That's very cutting edge.
Yeah, but the basic principles, I would say, still very much apply.
I think a good percentage, like maybe, I don't know, 80, 75, 80% is really going to be there. These are tried and true principles of the web development and will apply for a long time. But that said, I think, yes, we are already thinking of the next course. And that brings to the second point. How much coffee does an average Google Chrome developer drink? So, well, I think maybe you can see it here on the table.
Yeah, we were thinking about your question most of the night. So,
coffee aficionados as well.
A little bit.
Sean and I often meet in San Francisco at one of our favorite coffee bars.
Yeah.
Where they have
we haven't done that
coffee.
in a while. We should do that.
We should do that.
But yeah, talking about the first question again, I think a lot of the next courses we would do on mobile web development are actually building off the fundamentals that we've talked about here. So diving more into specific things you can do with the various device sensors, for instance. I mean, there's a lot of like individual use cases that a general course doesn't really need to talk about, but it's very interesting. Web sockets or something like that would be something that would be really useful.
On the server side.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to do. As Sebastian said, we need to do another 58 courses. So we have ideas.
We'll get on that.
We'll hopefully be able to share them pretty soon.
Yep.
So Javi in Spain was asking us a couple of great questions. So regarding the power consumption of the phone antenna, one of the lessons explains the different states of it depending on the requests being made. What is the behavior with a WebSocket and server-sent events? Are they power hungry in keeping the antenna on? So I think that's a great question. As Sean said, we are definitely overdue of creating some server-side logic parts of the course, of a new course in the future. So, so in essence, Javi, if you create a plain WebSocket connection and you were not to send any data over it, then you would not be using, the connection would be completely idle, therefore not using any power. So where it gets interesting is WebSocket, you really need to think of sort of a server side and a client side component, and they need to sort of speak to each other. And so in between, there's the network, there are proxy servers, there's lots of other stuff that gets in the middle of your end-to-end connection. And that's where you get into things like keep alive messages that need to be sent. For example, mobile network carriers, they often time out between 5 and 15 minutes of an idle connection. So you need to make sure that stays open.
Yeah.
But then the problem is that developers say, oh, well, we're doing these keep alives anyway. Let's just throw a bunch of other polls over the wire. Let's just check for new data. And that's where it gets sort of taken out of place. So a couple of good things to check on. And I posted these in already yesterday. I posted some links. And this morning I actually just added another link. So I added some links in the moderator. So check that out, Javi. There are a couple of great things. So there's an AT&T tool that allows you to test, the how much bandwidth is being used, and that's a great external tool that you can use to do some testing yourself. Also, a must-read is a book from my colleague Ilya Grigorik, High Performance Browser Networking. There's a whole chapter on how to eliminate polling. And I think that's really, you have to take a step back again as well and say, all right, you're using a WebSocket, so supposedly you're doing that for some sort of real-time data. So what's the alternative, right? The alternative is AJAX polling. That's going to be far worse.
Yeah, way worse.
And not just in terms of battery power, but also in data consumption, because you have all the overhead that comes with the HTTP requests and that are being set up and torn down. So lots of problems there. I think you're definitely on the right track with the WebSocket and server-sent events. And then it's also a matter of like doing it right. And check out Ilya's in-depth chapter on that. And
I would actually say just check out the book, period.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of web developers don't actually know as much as they should about the underlying network and how it works. And Ilya does a fantastic job of laying the entire thing out very clearly.
Buy the book now. Great. All right, so another question from Javi. I don't think it's possible right now, but are there plans to mock other devices' sensors, like camera, video, mic? So I'm not aware of that. I think the majority of the stuff that you can mock, like geolocation, is stuff that when you're developing on a desktop, you just don't have access to easily.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty common to have a camera these days. I mean, that's changed, of course, from a few years ago, maybe.
You might not, but
right. So I think, but geolocation would definitely be something that you would have easily access to at a mobile device. I think anything that you feel would make sense as a feature, just file a bug. So in Chrome, you can do that in CR bug. All the other browsers, they have their own ways to file enhancement requests rather than bugs. It's not a bug, of course, but but you can definitely, I think, and actually coming to one of your other questions. Let me just jump to that, which I love this suggestion.
Yeah, this was a really cool idea.
Also from Javi. About mocking the access to the device's GPS sensor. The Chrome DevTools offer the ability to overwrite location with a fixed location.
Right.
Is there a way to mock an actual route with multiple GPS readings? I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, that's an awesome idea.
You should file this and go to CR bug, the Chrome bug tracker for Chromium.
Would this be in Chromium's or would this be in the DevTools team specifically?
No, well, it's still
all the
part
same
of the
thing,
same, but then it will be triaged accordingly.
Right.
So,
okay.
Yeah, I think that actually, when I read it, I thought, wow, that's totally something that should be done.
Yeah.
So great idea.
Yeah.
I'll definitely be talking internally a little bit more about that as well. Because it shouldn't ultimately be too hard to.
No, I wouldn't think so. I mean, you could make it really, really nice if you had just, the ability to draw out a route or something, but even just having like a list of GPS points or like a start end and then figure it out from there would already be really awesome.
Yeah, because we could get some data from the Google Maps directions API. Right. Yeah, that's actually really cool. Maybe you could set a speed.
Oh, yeah, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, so this is really for anyone that is not aware of it. So there's a navigator, there's like two ways to get geolocation. So you get a one-shot location or it is watch position, which gives you constant feedback as to where you are. So that's something you currently can't mock. But all right, so good idea. All right, Craig from Maine. What are your recommendations for automated testing tools to use to do integration testing of mobile web apps? What about unit testing of JavaScript and CSS? Is there such a thing? Yes.
Yes. For overall automated testing, my favorite test runner is Karma by far. I don't think anything else really comes close. It gives you the ability to automatically open up a browser or run it in Phantom.js, for instance, if you want to do headless testing. It's a fantastic test runner, and it supports just about any testing framework that you would want to use. Personally, I really like Karma with Mocha. Mocha is an actual unit testing framework. Mocha, yes. And it's fantastic. That's the one we use. We used to use Jasmine, which is also really good. we just ended up liking Mocha a little bit better. Chai for individual, like a BDD, like a behavior-driven development. Testing is really good. For mocking stuff, what I've generally used is Sign-On. I don't actually know if that's how you pronounce it, but it's really good for mocking and spying on various methods and objects. Does this very well. For overall use testing and browser testing, Selenium is a good one, I would say. That's really nice. I think that's most of the stack we use at Udacity, actually. I don't know. Do you have any other recommendations?
No, that's about right.
I mean, all of those together, and you get a pretty good, I would say, testing infrastructure and coverage. So I would recommend using all those tools. They all have really good documentation, I think, is the main reason we went with just about all of those. There are other options out there, but the documentation for all of those is really nice, in my opinion.
Cool. Great. Another question from Craig. How would you handle input validation and output escaping of data input by users to prevent cross-site scripting attacks? Good question.
Do it on the server.
Yeah, so actually that does bring up a good point.
Yeah.
So a lot of the input features, right, all of the nice form functionality in HTML5 really only gives you sort of a client-side convenience.
Yeah.
You still need to do all of the testing on the server. So even if you have, let's say, type equals email, and you send that to the server using the form.
Even if you have a pattern that it has to conform to.
Right, you can't be guaranteed, because supposedly anyone could bypass, like you could bypass even the browser and create some sort of client that sends data directly to the server. So
easily.
The server needs to be set up to be very careful about any data that is coming in.
Yeah, and it needs to, most frameworks that you're going to run server side have this basically built in at this point.
This is
you can turn it off, but most modern frameworks will do it by default, and you have to explicitly turn it off, which you shouldn't do.
Right. Well, it's not something you want to reinvent.
Right, exactly. This is something that you can easily get wrong. So I would just, whatever framework you end up going with, I would actually check what their escaping policy is, and if it's not automatically turned on, then read their documentation on how to turn it on. Is doing this yourself it's like crypto. Doing it yourself is a bad idea.
It's hard.
It's easy to get wrong, and it's very painful when you do get it wrong.
Cool. So Luke in Honolulu. Well, maybe he should just go directly hop one island over
to Maui and ask your question.
Find Chris on the beach. Okay.
Tell him to come back here.
We'll take a stab at it.
Okay.
Can you give a newbie description of the tech stack used in developing the conference app? What did you use and why? For example, Node, Compass, Grunt, Bower, Yeoman, App Engine, and so on. So
okay.
You have a description of it?
Yeah, sure. So actually, let's just start at Yeoman, because that's what sets all of this up. So if you don't know, Yeoman is basically a scaffolding tool, and it's fantastic. You tell it what kind of application you want to run or build, if it's just a bare web app, if it's, for example, a Polymer application or a Rails app or Angular, whatever you happen to be building out. And it'll ask you a bunch of questions about different things you want to include, if you want to use Bootstrap or not. It's actually really well done. It's really well maintained, too. It's actively developed all the time, and they're constantly adding new features and tweaking the scaffolding, essentially. And what that'll do is it'll set up a bare index file and a code structure, folder structure, essentially, and for organizing all your code. It'll also set up a build step using Grunt. I think mostly using Grunt right now. I think they're working with getting Gulp set up too, of course. But so it'll set up this build step where you can, for example, minify all of your JavaScript or deal with any CSS preprocessors that you might have, anything like that. So that's what actually set all of this up. And to do that, it actually uses Node to run Grunt, because Grunt is a Node package. And that's actually all we use Node for, is just running the build process. So we don't actually use it for anything else. It looks like on another question there was some confusion, which actually tripped me up when I first looked at it too. After looking at Matt's code and build process, is that you can run, say, Grunt server, and that'll run a local web server that you can test. We don't actually use that because we also wanted to put it on the web and on App Engine, which doesn't support Node currently, which is too bad. So we actually use Grunt build to build the entire application, go through the entire build process, and that puts everything in the dist folder. And then you, from there, run in the dist folder the local App Engine instance using either the GUI or dev app server, the Python script. So yeah, in that case, it will run on the correct port and everything. So don't use Grunt server, use dev app server. The rest of the build process is actually relatively standard. We use Sass, and so we do some pre-processing of that to turn it into CSS. We were actually I just removed this. We were using Compass because at the time I was trying to get source maps to work.
Right. Oh yeah.
And Sass at the time didn't have support for actually building source maps. And it came maybe a week or two after the course launched, I think. Maybe it's still not in there, but when I was building this, it wasn't quite there, but they were like, yeah, we're maybe a month away. I was like, that's too late. So I had to switch everything over to Compass, but the source maps didn't end up working anyway because they're a little brittle right now.
That's too bad.
It was basically a conflict between the source map and auto prefixer, which was then changing lines because it was adding vendor prefixing. So we actually don't use Compass anymore. We just use the Sass tool to convert the Sass to CSS. We use typical minifiers to minify all of the JavaScript and everything down to the minimum amount. I think we use Uglify for that.
Yep.
And then Bower we use for actual client-side dependency management. If you aren't aware of Bower, it actually tries to bring package management to the client side, and it does a fantastic job.
Yep.
I'd highly recommend using Bower. It's a fantastic tool. It makes adding third-party libraries into your code sane. It's a hugely useful library. So I think those are the primary pieces that that everything uses. If I missed something that you're still unclear on, go ahead and ask another quick answer. We've still got some time to do that. But I think those are the main pieces.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thanks, John. Yeah. So, off topic, are there plans on making a Udacity course about Dart, Angular Dart, Polymer, one of the remaining 58? So, from Javi, again, in Spain. So,
all of those would be awesome.
They would all be great. I think, like I said, we don't have anything to announce quite yet. But we are very actively looking at building out more of this curriculum, and we're actually meeting this week.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for more details on that front.
And all of those in specific would be really awesome. I for one love Polymer. It's probably not quite at a stage yet.
It's a little early.
It's a little early, but it's coming really cool.
Coming along very, very quickly. So that very excited about that actually. Right.
Mm-hmm. But all of them would be really cool.
A question from Sue. How accurate is geolocation in the average mobile device? Within a few meters, centimeters? I have an idea for an app, but I need to locate features accurately. So one of the things that you get back, so when you call the geolocation API, Sue, you get back the lat long and a third accuracy. So there's really no way, when you create an app, you can't really know who's using it and on what device they're on, and also whether they're using, for example, Wi-Fi. So the geolocation, effectively, there's no way to say, give it to me from Wi-Fi or GPS or anything like that. There's a high accuracy mode that you can turn on, and that's the first thing you should be doing. Turn that on. It's just a parameter that you pass in and enable high accuracy. Don't quote me on the exact wording, but you can turn it on to get the most accurate view, but there's no guarantee as to what you're getting back, because that depends a lot on what people have turned on. So if they've turned on pretty much everything there is, and many devices will ask you that, they'll say, hey, do you want to add Wi-Fi so we get an even better view? If you've done that, you're going to get a very accurate, like literally down to a few, it's meters for sure, but it's not be centimeters, but it always will be some meters. But the interesting thing is you'll get back the accuracy as a parameter in meters. So that's basically a radius of like how far like you could be away from. So the API will give you back a sense of how accurate this is going to be. So it could be something like, well, you're within a mile of this location, or you're within meters from this location. So there isn't a way to say to guarantee a certain accuracy, but there is a way to check how accurate, and then say to interact with the user saying, hey, well, you know, we can't really do anything right now. You need to have a more accurate reading, and so on. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah. And I don't think there's a way to do centimeters right now, unfortunately, which that would enable a lot of really cool possibilities.
Like in-store beacons.
Yeah.
All right. So can you go over the files? So Luke in Honolulu again. So can you go over the files in the conference app and the build process? I think there's a bug in the conference app running grunt server. This is what you were talking about earlier.
Before.
Opens the server on port 9000. However, the browser looks for the JSON files on 8080. What's going on?
So
is that
that's
the node.
Yeah. Okay. So that's if you run grunt server, then it'll run on port 9000.
Right.
And if you run dev server, then it'll run on port 8080. Just make sure that you're in after you run grunt build, change into the dist subfolder and run dev app server there, or run the app engine GUI. Okay. Either one will work, and that should, unless you've got another app engine instance or another local server, something running, run on port 8080.
Right. Perfect. Okay, so I think, let me double check that. Yep, so we're at the end of the questions for today. So all of these office hours are recorded. As soon as we're done here live, the recording will be available at the same URL, so you can definitely check it out if you missed it. Next week will be our final episode. You can ask questions. The dory is already open. You can
go nuts.
Ask away, and you can ask questions about any of the lessons really. Like we're not like originally we thought, well, just the final 3 lessons, but feel free to ask anything. Chris will be back, and
you should ping him and ask him when he's going to get back from Maui and why he's
what's happening,
spending time there instead of with us,
sipping Mai Tais on the beach.
For sure.
So so we'll be back next week. You can check it out on Google Developers Live, developers.google.com/live/Chrome. That's where you'll find all of the different episodes on Google Developers Live that we're putting on, including next week's 9 o'clock, same time. We'll be back, and in the meantime, hopefully you're having a good. Hope you have a good week, and talk to you next week.
Bye, guys.
Bye.